Alright everybody, we're back working on the E93, doing the new n54 swap on it. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, I bought this car for $3,300 and the n54 had some damage to the block around cylinder 3. We have yet to tear down the old block, so if you need to catch up, I'll put a card up here somewhere for you to click to watch the rest of the videos. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on regasketing the n54. So I'm also doing rod bearings, so if you haven't seen that video, I'm putting King rod bearings in. I bought this motor on OfferUp for $200, so I don't really know the history of it or what's going on, so I figured I might as well do the rod bearings while I have everything out. First things first, we are going to strip off the old valve cover. We're going to take off the oil pan and get ready for the rod bearings, which will be in a different video. And then we're going to start looking at the front and rear main seal, and then we're going to rebuild the oil filter housing off of the old motor with new gaskets on the oil cooler, new gasket on the oil filter, obviously, with new bolts and everything. So that should get us to no oil leaks. Fingers crossed for that. So let's get started in taking off the valve cover. This process is probably pretty similar to what it's like in the car. You just got to get access to the valve cover first. If you need that information, you can check out one of my mini videos on this car of tearing down the top of the wire looms and air filter and all that stuff. So let's get started. Alright, so I got the fuel rail off of this side and disconnected all the injectors and pulled the injectors out. I pulled the injectors because I'm going to be replacing them with the Index 12 that I have off of that motor. Those are Index 1, so we really don't want those, and the seals look terrible. So I bought a pretty cool tool. I bought a scope for the motor, so we're going to take a peek inside once we get this valve cover gasket off and see what it looks like in the cylinder heads. I imagine there's probably a few walnut shells that made it in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow some air in there, open up the valves and blow some air in there to make sure everything's cleared out. But we should be fine, because the reason they use walnut shells is because if it does get inside, obviously if you have a lot in there, you're fucked. But if it does get inside, then it will just burn up and go into your exhaust. But we'll get this valve cover off and we'll take a look and see what it looks like inside. So to be honest, I don't really know what I'm looking for, but in general, it looks pretty clean in here. I don't see anything that's alarming or any extra sludge. I see a little bit of gasket maker here, so whoever tried to do the valve cover gasket last time didn't do a great job. They used this gray gasket maker, and it's kind of everywhere. It's on some bolts, it's in the threads. So I don't know if that's protocol. I haven't looked it up yet, but I doubt it, since it's all over the cam trays. But I'm pretty happy with it, and so we're just going to clean all this up as best as we can, and clean out these holes, and then we'll look inside the cylinder and blow out any debris if we see any that's inside there. So pretty happy with it. Alright, so I got my scope here. I got it in cylinder 6, so I don't know how well you guys can see it, but hopefully you can get a decent idea of what it looks like in there. Looks pretty clean. I'm just going to take some air and blow it out. The valve is open, and then I'll move on to the next one, and go one by one and blow them all out until everything is out, until I've done every single one, so I can make sure everything is out of the cylinder. And then I'll start preparing the valve cover, and we'll clear out all these cylinders and then start with the gasket. Alright, so a couple days have gone by, but I got the valve cover off. I've cleaned up the valve cover, cleaned up the surface and everything. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip the engine over, actually, and I'm going to start taking off the actual oil pan. And in a separate video, I'm going to be doing rod bearing replacement, so check out that video if you are interested in doing rod bearings on this car. But I'm going to take off the oil pan, and then we'll get to doing the rod bearings, and we'll finish up the rest of the gaskets in this video. Alright, so what we're going to be doing is removing all these bolts. These are aluminum bolts, and so they're one-time use, so you're going to want to get a kit to replace these bolts, as well as the gasket. So, all right, so we got the oil pan off. You could see The next thing that we're going to have to take off for the rod bearings is this stuff. So that'll be in a separate video if you're interested in that. But this video will pick up where I'm putting on the new gasket and reassembling. So, alright, so the rod bearings are done. So if you haven't seen that video, go watch that video. I'll link it above. But now we're going to start torquing down all these bolts so that way we can get the oil pan and the oil pan gasket back on. So all of these are fresh bolts because they're one-time use bolts. So if you need the torque specs, you can look on the oil pump bolt kit from FCP Euro. It has each bolt listed with the actual torque specs. Alright, so everything is torqued down to the bed plate, so now we can put the oil filter or the oil pan gasket on there. So clean my hands really good, I'm going to clean this area really good, and then we'll get it on there. Alright, so we've got the fresh oil pan gasket and the fresh bolts. So I've got the oil pan clean, so it basically looks brand new. So now we can start assembling everything. Alright, so I got the oil pan all torqued down. So the smaller bolts are going to be 8 foot-pounds or 8 newton meters or 6 foot-pounds, and then you torque it another, I believe 60 degrees for an n54, 90 for an n55. So what I did was I would put a slash mark with a Sharpie when I did the foot-pounds, and so I went in a crisscross pattern all the way around. The one thing you don't want to do is just go all the way around in a circle. You want to go back and forth at least. And then once I did all of that, then I went back around and did the degrees. The only thing is the back longer bolts, those are going to be 180 degrees. So I would just do a second slash on it once I did the degrees. And so that way I could keep track of which ones I had already done. And so now they're all torqued down. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a new oil level sensor in there. And that should be it for this video. So I'm still waiting on a few things from FCP Euro, but on the next video you can expect front and rear main seal, and then we can do the valve cover, and then fuel injectors and all the accessories and stuff like that. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, drop a like on the video, and I appreciate you guys watching. So I'll see you next time. I'm just really trying to show you love. Say you tired and you need a new love. Use what you got for your lose love. See new things with your views up. Yeah, what you want.